and welcome back to another Blu-ray review. And this time we're going to be looking at and talking about and discussing and diving into and delving into and deeply dissecting spine number 302 in the Eureka Masters of Cinema Collection series running on Karma, directed by Johnny To and Waika Fai. I love this this artwork on the front here of the slipcover. It's just, I don't know, just the yellow, the black, the contrast, the design of it. I don't know, Andy Lau there front and center. It's just a really, really cool design on the slipcover there that kind of, even the way that the colors are. I just love yellow and black. So that kind of, it really appeals to my sensibilities design-wise. But we have this film from 2003, directed by Johnny To and Waika Fai, co-directing the film for Milky Way Image production company that they both started, I think. Damn, I should really have known that, especially having gone through hours and hours of extras on this thing. But Johnny To, or Johnny Do, we'll talk about that in a little bit, is a director that I am becoming more familiar with now. So I think, I mean, it goes back to like the beginning of the collection, actually. If I can reach up here, spine number 2 in the collection, we have Mad Detective, Johnny To and Waika Fai again, so another co-directed film from those two, and this is the spine number 2 in the collection. This goes way back, and this is a really good film that I need to revisit. But that's definitely the first Johnny To film I had seen, and I think it's pretty much confined to the MoC collections. There's PTU, which I recently watched and really enjoyed. Throwdown, which is a kind of a beautiful film, really. Running Out of Time 1 and 2, which are just super fun kind of crime movies. They're not comedies, but they're fun. Capers, if you will. Cat and mouse capers, I'd call them. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Maybe it is just those ones in the collection. But to get another one is great. And 2003, Running on Karma, also known as, I believe, kind of the literal translation of the title is like Big Muscle Man, I think. And you do see Andy Lau, the great Andy Lau, on the front of the cover there in this huge kind of muscle suit. And at first, when I saw the images of this when it was announced, a few months ago, I thought, did Andy Lau bulk up for this role? And I thought, well, no, he can't have that much. That's crazy. And then I kind of saw a trailer. I was like, oh, that's like a full body suit like that. So it's one of the weird things about the film. Now, the film itself, Running on Karma, I think it's one of the strangest films I've ever seen. Now, I've talked about this a lot with Hong Kong films, and like, oh yeah, this film was batshit crazy. Oh man, this film was absolutely mental. It just smashes all genres together, and it's just a mishmash and a pick and mix of all these different feels and flavors and moods and tones and action and romance and drama and horror and music, But this one it's not in that same vein. It's so strange because of, I guess, like those films, it mixes a lot of things, but it's not really a film that feels like, as wacky or as kind of madcap as a lot of the Hong Kong films that do kind of put in a lot of different flavors to it. But this one is, I mean, how would you even describe it? In the booklet, it talks about how it's a superhero movie. It's it's kind of a serial killer, thriller. It's I just, again, it's hard to even get into the story because, well, I guess it isn't. It is and it isn't. Let's just put it simply. Andy Lau's character, called Biggie, he is a former Buddhist who is now a bodybuilder and an illicit stripteaser. He gets busted at the beginning of the movie for stripping off in a strip bar, for arrested for indecent exposure. So I'm assuming that sort of thing is not encouraged in nightclubs in Hong Kong, or at least it wasn't in 2003. I don't know how accurate that is. It's not mentioned in any of the... I think if Mike Leader and Arne Venema had done a commentary on this track, they would have spoken to whether or not male stripping would have been allowed in Hong Kong in 2003, legally speaking. These are the kind of insights we're missing on this release, I think. So he gets arrested at the beginning of the film. He's this big bodybuilder guy. He does do bodybuilding competition stuff as well. But he's on the run from this police officer, this woman played by Cecilia Chung, and it's about these two characters who kind of their paths have crossed, and Big E's strange ability to see karma. So what he does, involuntarily, it feels like, when he crosses the path to someone who's about to die, or in certain situations, he sees a kind of vision of their past life. So I didn't quite put these pieces together until the commentary, to be fair. So I was kind of glad that Frank Jang pointed it out. There's a scene where a dog is running down a street at the beginning of the film, and he looks and he sees this vision of a young boy kind of abusing a dog. Now, I thought that meant that, because I already knew the past lives kind of karma plot before I watched the film. So I thought that meant that this dog who's running down the street used to be a dog who was abused by a young boy. But what Frank was saying, and I think this is what the intention is that this vision is showing that the dog used to be a young boy who abused little dogs, and so it's this dog's fate, its karmic fate, that it will die in this way, because it comes back around. You do something horrible to these creatures in your next life, you will be a dog and you will die a dog's death, that kind of thing. But when he's on the run from this police officer played by Cecilia Chung, Biggie sees her past kind of pivotal karmic event, which is she used to be a Japanese soldier who beheaded a lot of people, a violent killer. And so he realizes this girl is going to die soon because I'm seeing this vision, and in her past life she did something horrible. But their paths just kind of keep sticking together. It's that kind of opposites attract, or that romance that's kind of destined to be. And as you see in kind of a traditional kind of romantic drama or romantic comedy, through different series of events, their paths keep crossing, and as I said, kind of sticking together. They can't quite pull apart. And so it's really about this woman and the fact that she is destined to die. And eventually he reveals this to her. And it's about how she reacts to this notion that no matter what she does, she will die very soon. She's a young woman. Because of something that happened in a past life. And that's not something she can change. That's not something that is who she is now as a person. But you can't change the karma of your past life. And so she has to decide what to do with that information and how to live her life for as little time as she may have it left following that. And he has to also decide to remove himself from the situation and this woman, because he doesn't want to get attached to someone whose fate he cannot change. He's not some kind of mystical master who can tell them how to change their life and then reverse this kind of dark fate. He's simply burdened with the visions, and it is kind of a sweet love story. What I loved about it is that it never really, is kind of consummated in a way that you would usually see in a film like this. And and I don't want to maybe spoil it, but there is a really beautiful scene, I think, where you can tell in her demeanor she's decided that, okay, I think that I need to kind of do my own thing now that I've accepted what's going to happen to me, and accepted that I can't have a relationship with this guy. At that point in the story, these things sometimes turn around. But she's decided at that point that, like, okay, I'm not going to get to have like this romance with this guy that I'm falling in love with, and I won't get to have a life with him either. But what do I have right now? What do I have in this moment? I'm walking down the street with him, and they're about to say goodbye. They're about to go their separate ways, and she says, "Can you just lend me a minute of your time?" And he's like, "Yeah, okay." And she takes his hand, and they just walk down this street. I think down an alley kind of thing. And we just follow them, and there's this kind of love ballad playing, and literally in the film it's timed out to a minute. And they just walk, they hold hands, and then she says, "Okay, thank you," and bye bye, and in English, bye bye, and then she just walks off. And I think it has so much more power and resonance, like romantically and emotionally, than a big love scene or a tearful goodbye or whatever at that point in the story. It's just a really elegant way to convey how people feel about each other. I think, I don't know, I thought it was really, really poignant. And the more I think about the film, it's quite a poignant piece of work. When I had first watched it, I was just like, what the fuck did I just watch? Because it oscillates through so many different things. and it is kind of wacky and whimsical. And there's these moments of action that are like really fantastical. There's a brilliant sequence where she is trying to figure out this murder, and she goes to the place where it happens, and Biggie comes along with her because he's going to help her out just one time only. You know, that ends up being more than just the one time, because he clearly feels something for her. But he goes to help her out by kind of going to this place, and he kind of sees what had happened, not only just in the past events of this murder scene, but in the past lives of these two people and why the conflict took place to begin with. But he starts running around this room and recreating the fight that happened that led to the murder. And the scene kind of fades in and out of between Andy Lau kind of reenacting it and the actual event as it happened, and they're like flipping upside down and stuff, and it's really cool. Like the staging of it, the geography of it is really well put together, and there's some real bonkers kind of martial arts sequences that are not really prevalent throughout a lot of the film, but there's these brief flashes where things get a little bit wacky and crazy, but otherwise, again, it's more just drama and the mysticism, of this, and why did he turn away from his Buddhist life? And that backstory gets peeled out, and she wants to know more about him and goes to his roots and speaks to his old masters and stuff, and that they come back into the story. I really loved all of that. But you just see all these different facets of him, and he's quite a tough character to crack. And in the third act, you really explore in a really interesting, layered way why he is the way he is. And I think you really need to pay attention to what's going on as well, because there's lots of kinds of uses of different points of time. And I mean, it's not crazy, but like as I was watching it, I was like, hang on, how does that? And I had to really think about it, and then it started to click again. So I would say this isn't a film you put on and kind of just like a typical perhaps Hong Kong film where it's just action, eye candy, and like an entertaining film. And this is an entertaining film, but it's deeper than the surface may be presenting, which is in a way what the character that Andy Lau is playing is defined by. There's more to what's behind the facade of this guy who's created this incredibly impressive physique. He's really hiding a lot of kind of trauma and himself within this. It's almost like the body is a mask in a way. Now the body itself, the prosthetic suit, was quite impressive, at times a bit rubbery, but for a film like this that isn't like a huge Hollywood blockbuster where they can spend millions and millions of dollars on like the highest state-of-the-art prosthetics, I thought it was really well done. Even though it was a Hollywood company that did the bodysuit, I still think that it was very impressive. And there's a couple of funny moments, like in the bodybuilding competition sequence where he's kind of puffing his chest out and the pecs start to like expand. It almost borders on like almost like a Carry On movie or something, but I was quite impressed, and I thought they did a really good job with it. But it wasn't just there to, and they talk about this in some of the special features about how for Andy Lau, it was like changing up an image of this guy who at this point in time in 2003 had been a big star in Hong Kong for a long time, and this was just a way to change his look and grab the attention of audiences. But it also served a thematic purpose as well, I think, where it's this guy who has really turned so far away from his Buddhist life that he's almost actively looking for anything other than. He's looking for excess, he's looking for vanity, all these kinds of qualities that the Buddhists would kind of just dispense with completely. So I found that kind of the dichotomy of his character to be just really interesting to watch unfold throughout the film, especially as Cecilia Chung's character Lee, she kind of changes his life in a way, I would say. The visions I was a bit iffy on in terms of visually, because he would see the person and then behind them, kind of half faded, you would see this kind of depiction of their past life. But all the visions were done, either they shot it on video, and it was standard definition. I really can't think of any other reason it would look like that, but it's really low quality like footage, which you can kind of get away with it when it's like you've got a film and then you've got like the kind of faded footage behind the character. You can kind of go along with it as this weird kind of, you're seeing what Biggie is seeing. But there is one sequence in particular where you see this fight play out between these two characters from hundreds of years ago, and it looks like a Mortal Kombat cutscene or something, like one of the original games, in terms of the background, and then you have the actors kind of like very shoddily comped into this low resolution, standard definition kind of plate. It was really poorly done. And I guess it's just because it was around this time when CGI was starting to be implemented into so many films, and it could be used in big or small quantities. And in this sense, it wasn't a huge kind of amount of visual effects, but it was, I guess, enough that it clashed a bit with, I just love the way film looks, and video to me, sometimes you can make it work. Something like maybe Prince of Darkness, The Message, this message is coming to you from the year 1999, like that works. But this, it was I'm a bit disappointed that the visions, which are kind of pivotal in some sense to the film, looked as crap as they did. Which it's not even a criticism. It's just what would I call it? It's just my tastes, I guess. I didn't like the visual look of it. It's difficult to go into, I don't know, because the ending is so different, and I love that about it. Like, the whole third act was like, wow, like, I would not have expected this film to go in this direction. And that's a real strength of the film, I think. And, coming away from it again, I just felt like, wow, that was just strange, And then listening to the commentaries and going through the extras and reminding myself of how good, like, the beginning of the film was, and how you have this chase sequence through the city of Hong Kong, and you got like the Biggie, and then there's this other guy who's like a contortionist, who's fit inside this small tiny box, and the police are chasing him, and these things are intersecting and stuff, and the mystery, the intrigue, and the cinematography is beautiful at times. There's some really great visual moments that it's just imagery that I find pleasing to look at. And that can be in the streets of Hong Kong, or that can be in these beautiful locations in China that they shot at with these real statues that are really impressive. And, the film has many palettes, both visually and again, story-wise. There's this different, I don't know, it's colored differently than a lot of other films, and I think it kind of works. And I'd be intrigued to watch it again now, knowing where it's all headed, to see if the film improves based on that. And they talk about in the commentary how it's a film that at the time, 20 plus years ago, Frank Zheng and F.J. DeSanto did one of the commentaries. They talk about how at the time they did a commentary on the film 20 years ago, but Frank said he wasn't really happy with it and didn't feel like he got the film back then. Whereas now, after 20 years, being older and the film has matured, he's matured, and he really gets the themes of the film, and it resonates a lot more significantly with him. So yeah, I'd be intrigued to see it again. I really enjoyed it. I was really impressed with Andy Lau's performance. I thought Cecilia Chung was great, and it's really those two characters. There's other people in the film, but we really focus on that relationship, and I thought she was wonderful. She really had a light and an energy to her, and a character who has to kind of learn something very horrible about herself and how she deals with it and stuff. And I liked the varying shades of acceptance, denial, the 7 stages of grief almost. They could have almost gone into that a bit more, I feel like, and explored her character even deeply, and the existential kind of crisis of learning this thing. But yeah, there's just some really nice visual moments in the film that I really love. There's one of her near the end where she's on this kind of mountaintop, and I thought that was really beautiful. And I like the location where her and Biggie meet, not for the first time, but they meet under this kind of street lamp at night, and it's just, I love that location, and they come back to it again, but it's just, when I think of the film, my mind goes back to that street and the lamp, and the moment where he's trying to like prove to her that he's a Buddhist and that he can see karma. Yeah, I might do a bit of a spoiler talk at the very end of this, but otherwise I'll leave it there for running on karma. I really enjoyed it, and the music was really beautiful too. I loved the track that played over the credits. It really settled you down out of the end of that story, I felt. And again, Andy Lau, I think he's fucking great. It's no surprise to anyone. I mean, he is one of those kinds of big stars from Hong Kong, and rightfully so. And God, the guy doesn't seem to age, because like, I mean, this is like 2003, and I've seen him in stuff in the late 80s, and he looks maybe a couple of years older than that, but not much, you know. I haven't seen him in much recently, but yeah, man, he just seemed like for a very long period of time he looked very similar. Maybe he's the Ralph Macchio of Hong Kong. So running on Karma, we'll leave it there for my discussion on the film, at least without diving into spoilers. So let's talk a bit about the Blu-ray itself. Let's take a look at the front cover here. So as I said, I really love this design. So you see Biggie there on the front, Lee with her camcorder, which is kind of a very significant part of the third act of the film. And then just there underneath, you see this Buddhist, which is a very strong image as well from the third act of the film, which I won't kind of spoil too much. But I just love the way this thing looks. It's a great front image, I think, and I really even love the Chinese text. It just, I don't know, it just really comes together nicely. On the back, we have the rundown of the story, and rundown of all the extras. 94 minutes, 185:1 original aspect ratio, and all the other details. This is a brand new 2K restoration, and the artwork is by Time Tomorrow. I thought the film looked really good. Not one of the best transfers I've ever seen or anything, but it was certainly very enjoyable to watch a film like this. Which again, some of these things have only been available. I mean, I don't know about this film specifically, but when you think about a lot of the Hong Kong films and other films from around the world that maybe have only been available on DVD, a film like this that is so beautifully shot, just to see it in high def is like a big win to me. But it did look very good. On the inside here, we have a different kind of poster, which this may be one of the original ones. I'm not entirely sure. Sometimes they do that. It's hard to tell for a film from 2003, but this one has a similar kind of theme, I guess, with the image there of Biggie at the top, and but I like it. Yeah, it's kind of I like the color scheme of this one because it's so different to the slipcover. And on the inside, we have the disc and the booklet, and if you take those out, you have an image on the inside of Lee and Biggie, I believe in that street I was talking about. Maybe not. But at least this image seems to evoke that kind of sequence for me. So, it does say on the back of the Blu-ray, the Masters of Cinema series is proud to present the film on Blu-ray for the first time outside of Asia from a 2K restoration. So let's talk about the special features. We'll get to the booklet in just a second, and I do have a slight criticism with this. So there are two commentaries. The first one is with Frank Zheng and FJ DeSanto, and the second is with Frank Zheng also. Now, beside the fact that I love the commentaries on these Hong Kong releases that we've had from Eureka for years now, with Mike Leader and Anna Venema, who have quite a fun rapport with each other. Their commentaries are quite informal, but have packed full of information. I just love their stuff, and it would have been nice to see them on this. But apart from that, I just think listening to both of these commentaries that it was stretched a bit thin, because you have Frank pulling double duty, and I do feel like Frank works best when he's with someone else. I think the most favourable co-commentator for me would be Michael Worth. I really enjoyed their commentaries, but I liked FJ in this one too. But in the first one, and I think the fact that they'd done a commentary on this 20 years ago was maybe part of like putting the band back together kind of thing, and doing almost like an anniversary kind of redo. I don't know. Frank says that I'm not going to talk about the usual things I talk about in commentaries on this one, but I want to focus on kind of the themes of the movie. And then in his solo commentary, he talks more about some of the actors and backstories of the people who worked on the film and stuff. But he also talks about the themes of the film. And so by, it's an hour and a half movie. Once you've listened to 3 hours of both commentaries, Frank talks a lot about karma and the price you have to pay with karma and how you can't change karma. And I think in the first commentary, he over-explained it so much that I felt like he just had not even understood it himself. And then in the second commentary, and he goes into it again, I realized, okay, he does understand it. He hadn't really worded it properly in the first one, I feel like. And I understand, because he like clearly loves the film and it's a favorite of his and one of his favorite, if not his favorite, Johnny To film. I feel like he really wanted to do the film justice and stuff, and maybe that was part of it. But in the first commentary, I was kind of like, what is he saying about the karma? And so it just got a bit muddled, I think, and repetitive in some respects. Now that sounds like I'm trashing it. I'm not. I learned a lot of interesting things. Another thing though, in the first commentary with FJ DeSanto, Frank Jang is talking, and FJ are talking about the actress Cecilia Chung. And they're saying, she's really great in this film, and it's a shame she didn't really do a lot more dramatic roles, after this movie. And they say, well, there's the thing, and and Frank's like, oh yeah, we're not going to talk about that, because apparently, with her and Andy Lau, but I'm not. You can look that up for yourself. And I'm just like, what the fuck, like, if there's some like delicate situation that you don't want to talk about, maybe don't bring it up in the commentary, because then it's just kind of like dangling the carrot and then pulling it away. And I'm like, oh, what the fuck? What was the controversy? So I looked it up, and there was something that took place in the late 2000s. I think there was a leak scandal. I think Cecilia Chung had been with someone famous, and there were pictures that were leaked and things like that. Now that's just, I guess it's not something nice to talk about. I can understand why they maybe would not want to kind of go into that on a commentary. I understand it, but it's also a thing that happened, But then again, if it's something that he really didn't want to talk about, he probably should just noted it down to say, don't even approach that. And to kind of bring up like, oh, well, there's that thing, but we're not going to talk about that. You can look it up for yourselves. It was a bit frustrating. But then in the second commentary, he does go into the story that apparently she didn't get along with Andy Lau, or Andy Lau didn't get along with her. And there was tension on set, apparently, which wasn't apparent on screen, I have to say. But that was just a weird one where I'm not sure why he brought it up, not to bring it up, or brought it up not to go into it. Again, it feels like I'm trashing it, but there was a lot of good information that I enjoyed listening to, but I felt like with the two commentaries, it spread itself a bit thin. And I have to be honest in these reviews, because I do feel like sometimes I'm so overbearingly positive about these Blu-rays, and I want you to know that I'm always honest, and in this case I did feel like if you combined those two commentaries into one, it could have been a really great single commentary. As it is, they're two fairly good commentaries that meander a bit and are a bit repetitive, So that's really the only criticism I can give. I'm not slating it, not trashing it, not saying you shouldn't listen to it, or to either of them. But I would say the first one with FJ is probably the one to listen to out of both of them. But I will also say and give Frank credit that I feel like I do have a better understanding of the film now, and I do feel like I appreciate the film more through his commentaries. You can't always have winners. He's done some fucking great commentaries in the past that I've loved. He's done some that I thought were pretty good and not as as great as the other ones. That's just the way it is, and he does a lot of these things. But for me, for this one, it wasn't a home run. That's all I'll say. Now the next kind of round of extras are in video form. The first is a new piece, which is called Reap the Whirlwind, a new interview with Gary Bethenson, editor-in-chief of Asian Cinema Journal. This is about 24 minutes in length or something. I loved this. And this to me was kind of a great example of being concise. And I get that we're in a commentary, you don't really need to be all that concise, but he packed in so much in this 24 minutes, and it was really engaging, and he talked a lot about the Milky Way image kind of methodology behind filmmaking in terms of Johnny To, or as he calls him in this, Johnny Doe. So I don't know whether it's Johnny To or Johnny Doe. It's probably both. I'll stick with To for now. And he talks about Johnny To and Waika Fai's kind of approach to producing films at that point in time, at least at Milky Way Image, where they would focus on like a commercial film, a film that they knew could be like a bankable production with like movie stars and a kind of appealing concept, and then they could make a personal film, something that's a bit more out there, that's a bit more challenging and maybe might not be kind of a big money spinner. And this was more of not a personal film, but more of a commercial film. But at the same time, he thinks there's some personal touches in there, and that I think he said Waikafai as kind of an interest in Buddhism. Maybe it's Johnny To, I might have mixed that up. But I really enjoyed all of the things he talked about in this, and talking about a previous film that they'd made with Andy Lau where he wore a big fat suit. So it's kind of almost like this film is kind of playing on that. Not that I've seen that film, but it's, but playing on that in a way that it isn't just, he was fat in this film, now he's big and buff, and that's it. No, there's more to it than that. Like, there is a kind of a resonance kind of thematically, as I've talked about, behind the kind of the big muscly suit, which I think at times it does veer into the kind of undeniably comical, just based on like the image of him running down the street, and you just see like the big rubber ass cheeks, like, I mean, they certainly catered for almost all of his body with it, but there's one scene in particular where I just I had to chuckle, even though I don't think it was meant to be funny. I really, really enjoyed the Gary Bettison piece. I thought it was great. I've never seen it before. I hope he does more for these Hong Kong releases. He's clearly knowledgeable with Hong Kong films, and I thought this was a really great piece. The other piece is an archival making of the film from the year that it came out, I'm assuming. So you get interviews with Johnny To, Waikafai, the composer of the film, the guy who wrote the song I believe is used in the film, the writer of the film, Andy Lau, Cecilia Chung.
佢大隻啦，佢識功夫啦，佢識跳脱衣舞啦。
好似好放蕩不羈，但係咧，其實佢一個內心好善良，
一個能夠睇到你以往啲事，亦都決定到你將會發生咩事嘅一個劉德華。
大隻佬一直喺我身邊陪住我啊，支持我啊，令到我有勇氣去面對將來嘅嘢咯。
佢有好搞鬼嘅時候，但係其實佢都有一個好善良嘅心。
大隻佬個角色其實係一個平凡人嚟，唔理佢大唔大隻，唔理佢經歷咗啲咩。
一個好特別嘅角色，咩都識咁。
So you get some interesting insights to the people who actually made the film at the time they made it, and talking about, and this is something that was mentioned in the commentaries and the Gary Bettison piece as well, but the fact that the SARS virus hit Hong Kong around the time that they were making this film. And because here's another thing that I find, I don't want to say frustrating, but exasperating is the word I will use, because I've experienced this before. Now I need, that's going to bug me, but I've forgotten who said what in which particular piece. I believe Gary Bettison said in his video piece that this film was shot silently. So all the dialogue and the sound effects were done later. That's very common practice in Hong Kong for a long time. And I believe that Frank Zheng said that the film was shot sync sound. So they did have the real voices.
The Milky Way team preferred not to shoot synchronized sound recording. They liked to do post-production dubbing. Enabled the production schedules of their films to be shorter and faster. So again, Running on Karma was shot silent. The entire soundtrack, right? Not just the music, but all of the sound effects, all of the dialogue, was laid in post-production.
I don't know who's right, and that frustrates me. It does frustrate me. Okay, it exasperates me and it frustrates me, because then you got two pieces of information. Then you have to really think, who fucking cares if Running on Karma was shot sync sound or silently? Because certainly no one watching this video cares. I care, to quote Luke Skywalker, but it's just one of those things where you have these two conflicted pieces of information. It's like, oh man, like now I don't know, I don't want to say it confidently with my whole chest, which it was, because it's 50-50. I've got no idea, and I don't know these people and who I can trust more than the other. So it's just kind of like, well, was it shot sync sound? I don't know. But I've heard both versions, and I don't know what to do with that conflicting set of information. Anyway, in the making of, you get to kind of see some clips of the making of the film too, which is really cool, and some of the footage of him trying on the suit and everything, which is really interesting to see. And I enjoyed hearing his comments and stuff as well about the film, and just his kind of challenges as an actor, and at that point in his career, and all the things that he's done, and to do something different like this, and and also how, and he talks a bit about how, like, you know, yeah, it's like, it takes like 10 hours to put the suit on. I don't know if it was 10 hours, maybe it was. And, you know, like, oh god, it's like, it's like really heavy, you know, makes you sweat and stuff. But he says as soon as he put it on, he just became Biggie. Like, he didn't even feel it. And I thought, like, bullshit. Like, I'm sure you felt every pound of that latex suit, but it sounds a bit more flowery and kind of poetic. If as an actor you say, I just disappeared into the role as soon as the suit came on, kind of thing. I'm sure it was a drag, and I'm sure that it was uncomfortable, and fair play to him, because he pulls it off. And I also think, like, he doesn't come across as, like, stiff in the suit, really. Even, like, the bodybuilding sequence and stuff where he's doing the poses, like, it just feels really natural. So they nailed not only the look of it, but the flexibility and the kind of movability, the mobility of it, you know. So in that instance, it's also impressive, I think. But the kind of vintage of the time, contemporary behind the scenes thing was really good. About 18 minutes, something like that, about 20 minutes. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad they included it. It looks like dog shit because it's like standard definition from 2003, but I still think it conveys a lot of interesting points for anyone who enjoys the film and stuff. I think there's a trailer as well. There's a trailer, and I was surprised to see that it didn't give away the whole film, because usually Hong Kong trailers, I'm accustomed to this, they give away everything, and this was more of a kind of general. It felt like a good teaser, actually. I remember now, it ends on the face of a particular character who's kind of very pivotal to, like, the last 10 minutes of the film, when it's kind of this kind of ominous kind of hook shot at the end of the trailer. I remember it now, so yeah, I quite like that. So that is all the extras on the disc. We'll take a quick look at the booklet and then round this thing up. So on the front there, you got Biggie in the streets of Hong Kong. Nice shot there. On the back, you have a Buddhist, and I love the kind of the image of this shot in the film plays out in slow motion, beautiful slow motion. So it's nice to see that on the back there. On the inside, you get the credit list, and we have a single essay by David West entitled "The Burden of Hope: Untangling the Stylistic and Moral Knots of Running on Karma." You can kind of see the very low quality. They've managed to make the low quality vision here look somewhat artistic by blurring it a little bit, I think, and it actually looks fairly decent. So this one goes into the making of this film, but also other films, yeah, around that period, how successful it was, the awards that it won and stuff like that, but also the co-directing job of both Johnny To and Wai Ka-fai, and really specifically just how the film does juggle so many different genres and tones. You get some nice images there, nicely framed, and kind of some of you see those two shots there where it looks like this kind of like hardened like murder mystery film, which it kind of is at some points, but not a whole lot, you know. Talks about other films that Johnny To has done as well, and kind of comparing that to this film, and just other films around the time period, and also where TVB in Hong Kong, which is a TV station that a lot of big names who, you know, really cut their teeth on television, like Andy Lau, Tony Leung, and then Johnny To, and even Wai Ka-fai, had come up through the ranks in television and then made a really successful leap to the big screen. I'd love to see some of these TVB productions. There's the one, I forget what it's called. It's something, because it's the adaptation of the story that we see in the Stephen Chow films, Royal Tramp 1 and 2, the Royal Tramp movies. And it's based on this like ancient Chinese story. And Andy Lau, I think, did one of them. I'm sure that he talks about it in this one here. There you go. 1984 series, The Duke of Mount Deer. At least I think it is. Adapted from Louis Cha's Wuxia story, starring Andy Lau and Tony Leung Chiu Wai. Anyway, I'm just kind of just thinking aloud here, which isn't really relevant or interesting or entertaining or anything. It's a good little essay. I enjoyed it. And you get some more nice images there as well. I don't know why I'm doing that, because I should be showing you that in a cutaway anyway. But nice booklet, nice little essay from David West. I enjoyed it, and you know, just a lot of stuff about, you know, this film that so and so worked on, and they did this TV show together and stuff, and there isn't like a huge kind of like, oh wow, this really puts the film into perspective, but it puts the the era into perspective, and I like that. So a good essay, and a very good release, and an almost great film. Yeah, I don't know, I come away from this just thinking about the film more and more, and really appreciating it more and more, and I kind of want to watch it again. If only I had the time to just watch these films again and again. I don't, but I look forward to the day that I revisit Running on Karma and seeing if it feels differently. But it's certainly a film that for me I had a great time with, and I almost had a better time with it after the film was over, and I was thinking about it more, So why don't we just end this with a little bit of spoiler talk? If you want to stop listening now, that's fine, and thank you for watching. But I will now just talk a very small amount about the ending of the film. So she goes off, Lee, to kind of find out more about this whole other subplot that had taken place with this killer who was on the loose, and Biggie felt responsible, or felt like he needed to bring justice and gain some kind of revenge even on this guy, but he was never able to find him. So she goes in search of this killer, and ultimately finds him, and she's murdered. And so like the third act of this film, where you're kind of expecting, hoping, praying, believing that somehow these two will come together, no, like he finds her decapitated body in the ground, and then he finds her head, and it's just like, what is this film, And then he kind of traces her steps. The camcorder has kind of the footage that kind of fills in the pieces, but I just couldn't believe what I was really seeing. And then he meets the killer up in the by the statues, but then it's not really the killer, it's himself, kind of from the future. And it's this weird kind of, it's like, it feels a bit like the cave scene in The Empire Strikes Back, but played out as like a whole fight sequence, with dialogue and kind of this internal struggle that's symbolized by Andy Lau fighting himself, Biggie fighting himself. I really enjoyed all that stuff. And also how the film at the end becomes less about the revenge or kind of righting a wrong or trying to change karma. It became about breaking a cycle of violence. And I like stories about breaking the cycle of violence. And this ultimately is that, where eventually 5 years later, he meets the killer. And instead of, as we'd already seen before, as some sort of future premonition of sorts, he doesn't kill this killer. He doesn't gain any kind of revenge. He just simply forgives. And the power that seems to hold in both his own personal journey and to this killer himself, who has been tormented. It's some really deep stuff. Does it really nail the landing on all of that? Maybe not as much as it could have, but I think it's still, there's still like two wheels on the runway. It's pretty. And I think about it now, and it's quite just the way that he kind of then sheds the hair that's grown over the years that he spent in the wilderness, goes bald and walks away, but takes the cigarette. And it's almost like he's now going to move forward in the way that he should be moving forward in his life as this Buddhist. But he's still going to take some of what, some of his journey from before. He's not, this isn't just like now I've shed the muscles, I've shaved the hair, and now I'm just this perfect kind of completely different new person. He's changing the way he lives and making a decision to kind of break that cycle of violence and learning the power of forgiveness. But he's still going to carry with him what came before, and he is the sum of all the parts of his life. And I thought that was a really good, again, as I'm talking about it, I just feel like it's really cool story-wise. Which isn't really a particularly elegant way of putting it, but I think it's kind of a badass kind of way to end a movie, which you just don't see very often. You really don't, especially a film like this, where there's a romance and stuff, and you just kind of expect two good-looking characters and actors who are kind of playing this romance against each other. You kind of just expect them to either end up at the end together, or at least spend a big chunk of the third act together, and they just don't. She just leaves goes to find her own answers, makes her own decision to essentially kind of put her life on the line because she knows that it's coming to an end soon anyway, in the hope that anything that she might do in trying to find this killer will then at least help Biggie to find the killer. So yeah, and just going back to that scene where they just hold hands for a minute, can you just lend me a minute of your time? It's a really beautiful thought. And I'll leave it there. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.